Welcome to Laurel Smith of Chicago, Illinois, nonprofit home video and artwork creations. In this particular video, we will be looking at the black African Ethiopian lion sphinx that ruled over ancient Giza, Gaza, Gath, Palestine, Ethiopia, and Jerusalem. He was denied in theological racism by the 1611 King of England 400 years ago, when the King of England appointed 72 Greek and Hebrew scholars to fly to Giza, Gaza, Gath, Ekron, Ascalon, Palestine, Ethiopia, and Jerusalem, and study the Islamic Aramaic Dead Sea Scrolls. This is where the entire English Bible in America today was copied from the African Sphinx descendants as the lion. And so when we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, we must first identify how this language looked. So if you give a blank sheet of paper to all of the presidents in the Middle East, like Syria, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Egypt, you give all of the presidents a blank sheet of paper and tell them to write their life story on it. And once they're finished, you put these blank sheet of paper on the blackboard. Then you take the Dead Sea Scrolls and put it next to these sheets of paper, in which all of these Islamic Aramaic Dead Sea Scrolls speaking presidents in the Middle East is using or speaking today. So you will see that this is the language of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, now as you look at this same language up on the air-viewed African continent, as viewed with satellite imagery, then we see that in order to draw a map of who spoke this Dead Sea Scroll language, we must view the entire African continent. So when we draw 12 white lines, vertical lines from south to north across the African continent, we discover something amazing. We see Islamic Aramaic Dead Sea Scrolls being generated from the shadow of mountains and the crevices and valleys. So on my video, I've outlined the African continent SPHINX 75 face. So it's a land surface Sphinx image that has eyes, nose, and mouth, and he's wearing a real headdress. So this is an Egyptian headdress. Now in the Egyptian headdress area, we see Islamic Aramaic Dead Sea Scroll language. So you say this is one of the greatest archaeological, theological, astronomical discoveries of all time, in which Laurel Smith of Chicago, Illinois, nonprofit home video and artwork creations has discovered upon the air-view African continent as seen from space. So as we rediscover the Aramaic Islamic Dead Sea Scrolls attached to the African SPHINX 75 geographic face image wearing a royal headdress, we must notice one thing about this African continent. We have drawn 12 white vertical lines from south to north. And when viewed with satellite imagery, we see African people living in each of the 12 lines. Hence, we get the term the 12 African continent tribes, which actually denies the 12 sons of Jacob in the 400-year-old mistranslated King James Bible that's read in every neighborhood church. So you say, well, what is the original discovery concerning the African Sphinx speaking Islamic Aramaic Dead Sea Scroll language, in which the 400-year-old mistranslated King James Bible was copied out of and from into English and Latin and Greek? Well, when we go back to the African continent, we see that the 12th white line falls in Egypt. Okay, so you say, well, wait a minute. So we have 12 African continent tribes that was denied in the 400-year-old mistranslated English Bible in the Egyptian era. Right. So now you got to realize that from south to north, you have 12 vertical white lines going across the African continent. And this is where we discover holy Africans in each of the lines. So the 12 holy African continent tribes was denied in theological racism within the English Bible as it exists today. Okay. Now, when we look at the 12 African continent tribes, we must first identify the origin of Judaism, okay, as being in the 12th line. You say, wait a minute, what's in the 12th line if we draw 12 white lines across the African continent from south to north? Well, the 12th line falls in North Africa, where Egypt is located. Okay, now you say, well, so this is where we geographically redetermine the holy Africans in Ethiopia and Egypt. Okay, now you say, well, what is that 12th white line? What does it encompass? Well, it encompasses the entire North African land surface, where Egypt, Sinai, Mount Sinai, the holy mountain in the Bible, where UFO that had 3 fingers and 1 thumb, blackish gray extraterrestrial guardians of our entire solar system. Now this is Alien 1 and Alien 33. These are the biological extraterrestrial life forms that have landed on Mount Sinai in Ezekiel's biblical will within the world like UFO in the Old Testament. So you say now, when we try to redefine the holiest of the African continent tribes, we're looking at North Africa. Okay, that's the 12th line. And that 12th line has the biblical African lion sphinx of Judah. So hence, we have redetermined the holy Africans in North Africa and Ethiopia, because we see an Ethiopian black African lion sphinx in North Africa up on the 12th line. Okay, so that's the 12th white vertical line going from Africa, from east to west. You say, okay, now on that line, we have the Exodus route of the 12 African continent tribes. Now remember, the 12 African continent tribes was denied in theological racism in the 400-year-old mistranslated King James Bible that's now read in every neighborhood church and by every minister, preacher, and pastor. So you say, well, how was the 12 African continent tribes denied in the English Bible? Well, they was denied when they illegally placed the name of Jacob, used the illegal name change of Israel, Jacob into Israel. So you say, okay, so what did that do? Well, remember, the 12 sons of Jacob is one of the biggest theological lies of all time. You say why? Because Christians in America is trying to trace their genealogical line to Israel through the 12 sons of Jacob. And this is theologically incorrect. Okay, so you have to make a note of that if you're a Bible Sunday school thumper. So when we go back to the 12 African continent tribes, we see the African sphinx, Lion of Judah, a black African face upon a lion's body, as he's couched down in front of the Isaiah 19:19 Giza pyramids. So this is the origin of Judaism when we look at the African Egyptian pyramid in Egypt, along the white 12th line.